Hello everyone. Welcome to Literary Animator, a place where you study, we animate. Before we start, I want to inform you all that this video is explained in English. If you guys need Hindi explanation, please let me know. I will create a video in Hindi as soon as possible. Feel free to comment if you like my lectures to boost my confidence. Shout out to my new subscribers. Before we start, let's talk about the term Duchess, which means the wife or widow of a duke. Duke is a male title either of a monarch ruling over a duchy, or of a member of royalty or nobility. The Duchess of Malfi is set in 16th century Italy, primarily in the Duchess's residence in Malfi. The Duchess is a young widow whose two brothers, Ferdinand and the Cardinal, arrive from Rome at the outset of the play. Antonio, her domestic manager, has just returned from France. Before leaving the Duchess, Ferdinand hires Bossola, a former murderer for the Cardinal, to purportedly maintain the Duchess's horses, but in fact to watch on her for the brothers to ensure she remains pure and does not remarry. Bossola is hesitant at first, but finally agrees. Before returning to Rome, Ferdinand and the Cardinal lecture the Duchess on the immorality of remarriage. She says that she has no intentions to remarry and expresses annoyance at their attempts to exert control over her. However, as soon as they leave, she begins planning a proposal to Antonio with the assistance of her maid, Cariola. Antonio marries the Duchess, who tells him that they will find a way to pacify her brothers. Act 2 takes place around 9 months later. Bossola suspects the Duchess is pregnant and devises a scheme to prove it to himself by offering her apricots, which are supposed to hasten labor. She receives them and quickly becomes unwell, fleeing to her bedroom. Antonio and Delio talk about ways to keep her employment a secret. Bossola now assumes his belief is right, but finds further confirmation in the form of a horoscope Antonio drew for the child. With the news verified, Bossola writes a letter to the Duchess's brothers to notify them. Both brothers are enraged, but the Cardinal remains calm, whilst Ferdinand becomes irrationally enraged. Because neither of them realizes she is married, they both assume the baby is a jerk. Ferdinand declares that he will not take any action until he learns who the baby's father is. Act 3 begins about 2 years later, with Delio's return to the Duchess' palace. In the interim, Antonio and the Duchess have produced 2 additional children. Ferdinand has just arrived, and both Antonio and Delio assume he knows something about the Duchess' children. Ferdinand surprises the Duchess in her bedroom, and when she tells him she is married, he warns her not to divulge the name of her lover to him, should horrible bloodshed be unleashed on all of them. He permanently bans her from his sight. The Duchess, in order to protect Antonio by removing him from Malfi, falsely accuses him of stealing from her and has him exiled to Ancona. After he has left, Bossola defends his virtue so vehemently to the Duchess that she admits the secret of their marriage. Bossola pretends to back her up, and she sends him after Antonio with money and word that she would shortly follow him. A few days later, the Cardinal tracks them down in Ancona and exiles the Duchess and her family. Bossola gives her an allegedly forgiving but actually threatening letter from Ferdinand on their way out of town, and the Duchess, anticipating an ambush, orders Antonio to split from her with their oldest son. Bossola and a squad of soldiers kidnap the Duchess and her 2 remaining children and bring them back to her palace as soon as they part ways. Act 4 begins with Bosola telling Ferdinand that the Duchess is taking her incarceration bravely, which enrages him. He shows her with wax corpses of her family members in an attempt to drive her nuts with sadness. Despite Bosola's appeals to Ferdinand to stop torturing her, he refuses and instead sends a gang of lunatics to harass her. Bosola reappears, dressed as a tomb builder, and prepares the Duchess for her death. Executioners arrive with a cord to strangle her, but the Duchess remains calm and fearless, content with the prospect of reuniting with her family, whom she still believes are dead. They suffocate her. Bosola then murders her children and Cariola. Cariola begs for her life, but it is in vain. When Ferdinand confronts the Duchess's body, he is overcome with remorse and fury at Bosola for carrying out his orders. He not only betrays Bosola by declining the promised payment, but he also displays indications of lunacy before fleeing. The Duchess gives one last glimmer of life, and before she dies, Bosola informs her that Antonio is still alive. When Bosola dies, she expresses genuine grief. In Act 5, Antonio, unaware of his wife and children's deaths, decides to petition the cardinal for forgiveness that night. Ferdinand has now gone insane and is suffering from lycanthropia, or the delusion that he is a wolf. Bosola comes, and the cardinal pretends to be unaware of the Duchess's death. He offers Bosola a large prize for Antonio's assassination, which Bosola accepts despite his plans for vengeance. Julia, the cardinal's mistress, approaches Bosola and declares her love for him, which Bosola uses to get the cardinal to confess his role in the Duchess's death. After the cardinal assassinates Julia, Bosola reveals he overheard the secret and demands his reward for assassinating the Duchess. The cardinal says it will arrive once he has slain Antonio and assisted him in disposing of Julia's body. Bosola seems to agree, but promises the audience that he will locate Antonio to either protect him or assist him in exacting his revenge on the cardinal and Ferdinand. The cardinal orders his courtiers to keep away regardless of what they hear from him or Ferdinand, allegedly because Ferdinand's insanity worsens when others are there, but in reality because he needs seclusion to dispose of Julia's body. Bosola, who was waiting outside the cardinal's chamber, murders Antonio, who had come to visit the cardinal. He enters the cardinal's room, distraught, and strikes him. Because of the cardinal's warning, his courtiers first disregard his screams for assistance. Ferdinand enters the melee and stabs the cardinal as well as Bosola. Ferdinand is murdered by Bosola. The courtiers arrive just in time to see the cardinal and Bosola's deaths, but not before the latter had revealed the details of the event. Delio enters with Antonio and the Duchess's oldest son, the family's solitary survivor. Delio and the courtiers agree to nurture the kid as a legacy for his parents, giving the play one more ray of hope.